Today in Flex in the City, we talk to Karl Harder, co-founder and managing director of Abundance Investments, financial services game changer, lifelong environmentalist. All that happening right now in Flex and the City.
Hello, everybody. This is Rachel Treese for Flex and the City. It is a sunny afternoon here in Luxembourg, and I am interviewing Karl Harder, who's in Gloucestershire today. And Karl is the co-founder and managing director of Abundance Investments. He's a financial services game changer and a lifelong environmentalist. Karl, excited to have you on the show.
Hello, Rachel, and thank you very much for inviting me. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, great to have you. So you're in Gloucestershire, but I believe this is a recent move. Is that right?
Yes, so I'm 45 years living in Hackney in London.
Right.
I grew up there, and it's a beautiful place. It's got all the concrete you could want, but part of me, and possibly because of the sort of environmental side of my life, wanted a little bit more greenery, wanted to be nearer mountains. I'm also a climber. So a move to Gloucestershire kept me close enough to London, but also close to Snowdonia, so I can get off and climb on the weekends, which is
fantastic. Believe it or not, I have climbed Snowdon once in my life. Managed it.
It's a beautiful mountain.
It's a beautiful mountain. I did manage it. So what interests me about you, Karl, I interview a lot of people from the financial services industry, but people who've started their career in financial services, and you didn't, and you found your way in. So tell us a little bit more about that.
It's a funny journey in. So my background is I've been in the environmental sphere most of my life. I did environmental science at university. I went on to do environmental policy. And then from there went into policy work originally. I was a researcher for MPs working on renewable energy policy and green policy more broadly. And I suppose rather naively went into that world thinking I could change the world through politics, and quickly became quite disillusioned in that space and realized that the impact and the ability to create change was minimal. And but through that, I suppose starting to get interested in other ideas for change, and got funded to set up a first green business, which subsequently failed. It was a lot of lessons in how you make business work. If you're spending money, you've got to get some money that comes in on the other side. But through that, a business came out of it, which actually was quite successful and was funded by Anita Roddick as one of the key investors. And
so what was that business, Karl?
That was called Green Your Office, and it combined selling sort of green products and services to offices, predominantly in the UK. And what was really interesting about it is we put in a green cleaning service, very sort of oddly from where I am, from what I currently do. So we had cleaners going into the offices, and rather than the officers paying lots of money for quite expensive environmental policy reviews, our cleaners went in and measured waste, measured recycling, and we could give recycling rates to the officers, and we could get floor one competing against floor two on improvements in recycling. And for that extra bit of value that we were creating, we asked our clients to pay the cleaners a little bit more in salary. So we were the first firm in the UK to deliver living wage cleaning. So we pioneered what is now quite a widespread concept of London living wage, working with an outside London citizen. So did some really interesting things. But through that, I started to sort of see the challenges that sort of ethical or green businesses were facing in scaling. It was about trying to find the money that would come into the business that understood the values of those businesses and would help them grow. And that interest in the financial side started to lead me to think about the ideas that led on to Abundance. So I left Green Your Office and went on to found Abundance, which was quite an interesting journey, because I sort of walked, or at a certain point was told by an individual that I went to have a chat with about the idea. I said, I want to bring together people, pool their money and use it to build wind turbines and solar farms. And this gentleman said, "Oh, Karl, okay, if you're going to do that, you have to go and talk to the FSA," as it was back there. And I thought, oh man, that's a food standards authority. Why would I want to talk to them? But I went home and Googled what the FSA was, and this sort of weird world of financial services came up in front of me. And I went and talked to the FSA and was very quickly told that I couldn't go and set this business up or launch this business, and then went on to find partners, 3 of us who ultimately went on and founded Abundance, who came with a bit more financial services experience than I had at that point. And that was 2011. We got authorized and been doing it ever since.
So you must have grown up with the film, with Gordon Gekko, and watched The Wolf of Wall Street. So what really drove you to get involved in the industry?
It's a really interesting point, because yes, if I go back to my I went to school on the sort of borders of London and Essex, and there was a big flow of people from my school into the city, and I looked at that journey and thought, it felt at that point that the reputation of the city was all about individual gain, sort of making money for yourself and maybe doing something for your clients on the way, and that without really digging into what financial services was at that point. It was that feeling that it wasn't doing something more sort of a broader, or it didn't have a broader purpose. That piece was lost to me, and therefore, as a sector, it wasn't something that I was interested in at that point. And I think that's what's been really interesting as I've got more involved in financial services is realizing how fundamental it is. And actually, it is about placing money into new businesses, new projects, new things. It's about creation. It's about building the future of our world and planet. And actually, then once you realise its power, which maybe is common sense, but was lost on me as an 18-year-old. When you understand its power, then you think actually it's really important that we have people in there who have a set of values which is about making the world more sustainable, making it a more equitable place for people to live, because ultimately, I think most people understand that equality and sustainability are fundamental to having a good life for themselves and the world. So, I think it's an interesting journey that I've been on, but Wall Street, I think it was Wall Street. Gekko was the sort of my sort of sole view of financial services back in the 80s.
Yeah, so I'm probably going to struggle to ask you about financial services leaders, but you mentioned that you worked with the great Anita Roddick, and maybe there are some other leaders, but I'm curious, what was she like? What was her leadership style like, and what did you learn from her as a leader?
I think it was, Anita was amazing as a person to sort of know and work with, in the passion that she brought to business, not just from the problem solving, creating a great product that you can be really proud of, but using that business to then create value for the stakeholders around the business. So, the types of things that she talked passionately about was not just the sort of the work she did with the supply chain and the sort of the communities in which some of the plants and so forth and seeds were taken that ultimately would create the products, but it was also how she would bring on junior staff members and grow these people who had come from maybe more disadvantaged backgrounds to maybe us, and grown through the business to build them into sort of positions of leadership, and it's just taking that a lot of satisfaction from seeing growth happen around her with individuals, and also growth in the communities and supply chains that she was supporting, as well as having that sort of hard purpose to the business to be not just about profit, but about trying to make the world sort of better place in the process.
Well, she was a pioneer, really, wasn't she?
I think you've got the sort of likes of Ben and Jerry's who also sort of pioneered that sort of concept of business around the same time, and ultimately those businesses have been now absorbed by more traditional larger corporates, but the core ideas and the sort of culture of those businesses has also permeated out into those wider corporates, and the influence has gone further. And I think that was the piece that Anita was really powerful on, was you can create a wonderfully ethical and 100% pure business, and you can service 10 people on a high street making soap in your back in your kitchen, which is where she started. but to have real impact, you need scale, and you want businesses who build that scale, who have the good values and the good product at its center. And yes, on that journey, you've got to make compromises inevitably. It's impossible for us as humans to take a step out of our door without having some impact on the world. But as technology gets better, as we get more conscious about the impacts we're having, we understand those impacts, we can make better technologies so we minimize that impact, and that's ultimately what we've always got to be thinking about.
Yeah. So your company is called Abundance. It's a name I absolutely love. If you were to really bottom line, what kind of people should go to Abundance? What's its, if you were to bottom line the purpose, how do you describe that, Karl?
So what we are is a place for people who want to invest money, but know that money is having a positive impact on the world, as well as earning them a return which is fair for the risk they're taking. So people come to us to invest their money directly into building new green infrastructure. That could be anything from a wind farm to a solar farm, but also doing some quite pioneering new technologies. So I think we're the UK's largest funder of tidal stream technology. So these are projects where you're harnessing the power from the tides going in and out, and other sort of innovative sort of elements of the renewable infrastructure and low carbon infrastructure. So yes, in a very simple sense, we're a place for people to come to feel that they're having an impact with their money, which is above and beyond just earning a financial return for themselves.
Absolutely. And do you think, as a whole, the financial services industry is doing enough to connect with a new generation of investors who do want to have a purpose and use their money to greater good?
Yeah, I think there's obviously been a huge awakening over the last 3 years and a massive shift in the traditional financial services world. I think the challenge the traditional world has is that they've got a lot of baggage and a lot of legacy issues they've got to deal with. So the person who is really motivated to invest ethically, and we know from the research we've done, that is a sizable chunk now of UK investors. They're looking for authentic brands that they can invest with, where they feel that brand really understands what it is to invest ethically and can be honest about many compromises, actually, because we know that it's in pure green invest. It's impossible. It's almost impossible to create a zero impact thing. So it's always about being honest about what is being achieved and where the compromises are. And I think this is something that actually the traditional financial service system is going to really struggle to be able to provide that honesty and actually also be trusted around whatever they say because of the legacies they've got. But I think, with that all said, there's a huge number of initiatives now happening in the mainstream financial world, helping sort of get us on this change, and we need everyone from Larry Fink, who's obviously talking very strongly now about this. BlackRock, that's fantastic and is very welcome, and we need BlackRock to change. We need Aberdeen Asset to change. All these entities need to change, and they are, but they have baggage, which is going to be difficult for them to sort of move out of as rapidly as we need them to move.
Okay, and if you could remove the baggage, what would you do?
Well, I think that the number one thing, if I'm looking at the issues the world faces, climate is the number one issue. Because without a stable climate, we can't deal with many of the other issues, such as equality and so forth, or the inequality issue. So climate is number one, and it's pretty well documented now that we have to have the radical change in years, not decades. It has to be this decade, and the number one thing that financial services can do is stop funding new coal plants. Right. New tar sand, new oil exploration. There is no need for it. The technology exists now to deliver our energy cleanly, and that is where the money needs to be going.
Good. And so now I'm going to move on to the leadership side of things, Karl. I think there's three of you who are leaders at Abundance. How important do you think the concept of being human is in financial services, and how do you go about doing it at Abundance?
I think it's a really interesting question. So there's two sides to that. So being human in financial services, I think, is a lot about how you communicate. So one of the interesting dynamics we've got is there's Louise Wilson, who's one of my partners. She comes from UBS Equity Capital Markets. She was MD of equity capital markets for EMA before she came to Abundance, and then Bruce Davis, who's worked in retail financial services, so the communication of retail product to sort of audience. Who's also a co-founder of Zopa, which was the first peer-to-peer lending platform. So something that, just in that human aspect, we're trying to make financial services a little bit more human in the way we talk to people. So when we were talking about how we communicate abundance at the start, I could still, it was only about a year since I'd had to pick up a textbook to read what a bond was. I didn't know what a bond was, but a bond is a term that is often sort of bounded around in financial services. Everybody should know it, but you go and talk to the average person on the street, they don't have a clue. And so many of the words and the language and the sort of way we think about financial services now that I'm in that world and the industry more generally have no relevance to people on the outside. So we need to make the language of financial services more human. We need to bring transparency in. And then I think that's also how we look at the leadership within our business. We're trying to run the business in a slightly different way. So it's the three of us who run it as a collective rather than a single CEO. And we do that because we believe that it mitigates the risk of, I suppose, the individual ego running away themselves. That sense checking between three is quite powerful. We also then run a very flat organization underneath that, which is delivered through essentially empowering the team around us to be independent, take responsibility, but then very much focused on creating an open door policy. So when people need to talk, they need to learn. When they make a mistake, they feel able to quickly come and talk and work out what to do and get things back on track if it needs it, or just to sort of sense check an idea before delivering it. And that we found to be really powerful. So, lots of businesses who got to a similar scale as us will have 30, 40, 50 people, but we've got 17 people who are amazing. They do an incredible amount. And that is, I think, because of the way we empower everybody in the business to be a leader, essentially, and lead their role, whether it's on the customer service desk, lead that, manage us up rather than us managing you down. And that means you can get a lot more done with a lot less people.
Fantastic. It sounds like it's really about harnessing the collective and creating a culture of agency where people can take ownership. Fantastic.
Good
so when you're not doing all these things that you're doing, or climbing Mount Snowdon, what else do you do outside of financial services, Karl?
Not a hell of a lot, to be honest. I've got three children, so and they range from 15 and 12. So that sort of very interesting period of teenage years, and then down to a 4-year-old who's just keeps us busy. So all hours of the day, 5:30 till 11, parenting in between that a bit of work.
And you're a keen cyclist as well, I seem to remember.
Yes. I used to do a lot of rowing back in when I was younger, and that had to stop because the hours that rowing demanded, and cycling is a nice way to go and feel the breeze on your face and get out and do something. So cycling and then climbing when I get a bit more time.
A bit more time. So I've got a couple of questions for you. So from the perspective of your 4-year-old, what really needs to change?
The way I have said it, I think maybe just reiterate the point, but the sort of our 4-year-old was a bit of a, hopefully she won't see this recording, but she was an accident. It wasn't planned. And then when I had her, I was, just so conscious at this point. The science had just been running away from us on climate change. It was very clear that we have unleashed change, which we can't stop now. And this will make the world a challenging place potentially in 40, 50, 60 years' time, very much her lifetime. And there was an overwhelming sort of sense of not quite doom, but concern when we realised we're having a third child. And I think there, from her perspective, the number one thing is that we just stop the burning of the most destructive climate change inducing sort of energies such as coal and oil, and as quickly as possible. I think that is that would be the number one thing on that side. I think
And so on the cycling side of things, I'm passionate about incrementalism, and I know that the British cycling team only managed to achieve some of the things that they did through really looking at incrementalism and making small changes, like changing the lycra on their tops, or really, really tiny small changes. So if you were to make a call to action for every single human being on this planet to do something really small that would have a major impact, what would that be, Karl?
Apart from buying an investment or abundance investment, the most powerful thing you could do, it would be moving from a position of eating meat on a daily basis to eating red meat twice a month. Would be a massive improvement. So, the logic for that is that cows emit methane, and that methane is I don't know exactly how many times more climate change inducing than carbon dioxide, but it's tens of times more powerful. And therefore the meat industry is one of the major drivers of climate change after energy and transport, but actually something we can quite quickly fix. And one of the beauties of methane is that it is incredibly warming for our environment, but methane only stays in the environment in its state as methane for something like 20 years, and then it breaks down, where CO2 is locked in for hundreds of years, if not thousands of years. So methane's creating a massive issue now. Stop eating meat as much, it will disappear quite quickly.
So you heard it here, folks. Only meat twice a month. We'd love to hear what your views are on that. And if you can commit to that, let's make our own little impact here on Flex in the City. Karl Harder, co-founder and managing director of Abundance. We love what you stand for. We love what your organisation stands for. Thank you so much for joining us today on Flex in the City.
Thank you very much for having me. A lot of fun.
You just listened to Flex in the City. Catch us on our next episode.